These being the words of Trod, former chief engineer of High Charity, now shipboard scribe of the Mern-pattern agricultural support ship, the Promise of Wisdom. It has been near 3 months since the fall of our precious holy city, and I have not slept. I do not know that I shall ever truly sleep again. The Forerunners are merciful and kind, I have always believed, and looked upon the sacred city of High Charity, the crowning testament of their glory, justly. But there was no mercy, no kindness, and no justice in what had befallen the poor denizens of our holy city. As the flood consumed all in their wake, how could the gods be so blind or so uncaring as to permit such horrors? Or is it possible that there are other deities in this universe? Monstrous evil creatures, like those the speakers of the governors of Contrition preach to, against whose malice that are all naught but insects. I do not know. I do not want to know. If this makes me a faithless San Shayum, so be it. Many of us within the flotilla have not spoken of High Charity, nor of what we saw and experienced as our poor city fell prey to the parasite. Not our children, nor our friends, nor our shipmates, nor even the ministers and captains of our vessels. But the memories will not leave me, so I shall set them down here, for I knew High Charity's history, design, and defenses as I known that of mine own body. Perhaps in the time they are found and read, our people will have gained a better understanding of cherishing a true home as we embark towards Cloister, and the evils that led us to this juncture. The history of High Charity extends well beyond the city's foundation, to the days of Jandra Quom, the home of all San Shayum, where the chariot of the gods, the fabled Forerunner Dreadnought, once laid. For millennia, this mighty vessel was buried beneath rock and water, submerged below the great Apothtia, one of the mighty seas of Jandra Quom. Early in the histories of the San Shayum, our forebearers discovered and partially uncovered the dreadnought and began to venerate it. Over time, these early worshippers would split over the usage of the ship, as the Stoics refused to enter the vessel, while the radical reformists wished to explore its great halls. These divisions would lead to a violent schism in our society, and soon, war. The War of Wills, that conflict was called, cultivated when the reformists barricaded themselves within the vessel. They then raided Stoic territory to collect and stock the ship with plants, woods, and seeds, and other goods from the planet, and made preparations to depart Jandra Quom. In time, the reformists unlocked the secrets of the dreadnought and left Jandra Quom, taking a gigantic piece of our world with them. This would later form the foundation of High Charity. Construction of the Holy City began shortly after the formation of the alliance of the San Shayum and Sanghili, with the ratification of the Writ of Union following the War of Beginnings nearly 3,000 cycles ago. This grand project would continue all throughout the First Age of Reconciliation, a visible manifestation of the fledgling alliance between the San Shayum and the Sanghili, serving as a spiritual and cultural hub of unification. Designed by the Minister of the Hearth, Laka Moai of the First Assembled Choir of Builders, High Charity was manufactured throughout the elegant array of mobile foundries called the Supernal Chorus, a long and elaborate process that had been initiated by the San Shayum well before the Covenant was even formed. At the heart of the city was the Forerunner key ship, one of the gods' foremost chariots, and the very dreadnought which the San Shayum had used to cause untold destruction on many Sanghili worlds. With its weapon systems taken offline, the vessel was decommissioned as per the terms of the Writ of Union, as a decisive show of the San Shayum's good faith at the very birth of the Covenant. The construction lasted for over 2 centuries, for the Great Dome was not yet fully erected by the time of the taming of the Legolo during the Age of Conversion. While the dome was under construction by both organic and robotic labor, The city was gradually settled, its atmosphere held in by force fields. High Charity was formally commissioned more than a century after the Legola were brought into the fold. Curiously, it was at this time that it was announced that our cradle world, Jandra Quom, was destroyed in a supernova, though some found the coincidence of this proclamation suspicious. None dared say against the word of the hierarchs. Thus, the Holy City became the new homeworld of all Sanshayum, as well as the seat of our imperial government. Over the centuries, the station expanded, grew, and burgeoned, becoming home to billions and the focal point of sacred pilgrimages by those who had never been graced with its countenance. As the seat of the High Prophets and the High Council, it was from High Charity that the rulers of the Covenant directed all activities within our dominion and well beyond. Built on the spine of the gods and crowned by the mighty and ineffable Dreadnought, High Charity's grand factories and treasure vaults devoured the wealth of hundreds of worlds. Despite its extraordinary size and hub architecture, High Charity was more city-ship than space station, employing powerful Forerunner artifacts to maneuver, the Wings of Malagus, and access slipspace, the Cepham Invictus, as well as boasting extraordinary shielding systems, such as Playon's Gaze and the Pavus of Urs, and an unparalleled arsenal of 32 super heavy plasma lances and 1,900 plasma beam emitters. There was nothing in the Covenant fleet that could compare to its raw firepower and resilience. At 348 kilometers in diameter and 505 kilometers in height, High Charity immediately demonstrated the glory and majesty of the Covenant, a magnificent citadel world teeming with hundreds of thousands of warriors, millions of devoted thralls, and a complement of warships beyond numbering. The Holy City's vast scale and complexity played host to tens of millions of individual elements, machines, and sacred sites, most of these dominated by the Sanshayum's majestic and ornate aesthetic, rich with colors and shapes designed to evoke awe and worship, though the inner reaches of High Charity grew cold, silent, and inaccessible a millennium ago. Many parts of the city station played critical roles in its service, utility, and protection, while others existed simply to display the Covenant's might. The spine of the gods was the nigh unbreakable skeleton of a derelict fortress-class warship found in orbit around Tulakato, the original site of High Charity's creation. The Fount of Light was High Charity's luminous apex, bathing the Dreadnought in accordance with Jandra Quom's lunar week, ultimately defining the Covenant's daily cycles of worship, labor, and rest. The skin of the First Worlds was the name given to High Charity's exterior surface structure, shielded by several powerful systems and wrought of materials taken from every member species' homeworld as a sign of unity and common purpose. The lances of the faithful were the ever-vigilant array of weapon emplacements born of divine machines or replicated from decrypted design patterns, capable of instantly vaporizing any unauthorized visitors. Hundreds of weapon cores were reverently collected from Forerunner god machines to guard the Holy City. The Assembly Forge was the title given to the foundries and refineries that labored to meet every want of the Covenant, especially providing countless tools to the Empire's impeccable war machine. The spires of gifting were the thousands of docking platforms and spires shooting out from the spine stock, designed to receive merchants, tithe fleets, and emissaries from 1,000 Covenant worlds. Food, water, artifacts, and workers poured into the capital, while manufactured goods, warships, and bureaucrats flowed out. From the bustling and ornately decorated window of Valen, which serviced ships arriving from Sanghelios, to the dark and violent Shadowport umbilicals, used by infusion smugglers and heretical cultists. It was here that the Covenant's real business of the Empire was conducted. But for a vessel who wished to bask in the glory of the Golden City, it would have to meet the judgment of the Eye of Kel, a vast portal passageway named in honor of a famous warrior of Sanghili legend. The gaze of 1,000-fold augurs judges the faith and purity of all who approach. Those deemed worthy may cover their starships in the purity and honor of the dreadnought shadow. Those deemed unworthy, well, they would not live to regret their folly. The Golden City was the crowning glory of High Charity. It was a center of law, culture, and manufacturing, as well as an everlasting symbol of the vanished Forerunner gods. Billions were born, lived, and died in its embrace, without ever setting foot on other worlds. The grand estates and high vaults were included in the resplendent Golden City, for those whose dwellings were graced with a direct view of the dreadnought, but also the myriad of towers, citadels, and sanctuaries. Dozens of floating city stations housed tens of millions in conditions befitting their station within the Covenant's rigid caste system. The lower districts were sprawling, self-contained habitats capable of housing tens of millions in conditions befitting their station, all employed in explicit regions that allowed them to service vital facilities, along with housing a number of massive factories, such as the assembly forges and the sacred promissory. The lower districts were home to the most of High Charity's massive Ungoi and Kig-Yar population. The Ungoi portion of the lower districts was methane-rich, that had allowed Ungoi to breathe without their ghastly methane tanks and masks. But the most resplendent of the districts found within the Golden City was the Tower District, the home of the High Council. Here, our most esteemed Sanshayum and Sanghili High Councilors were in residence, and would gather and decide the fate of our empire from within the imposing High Council chamber. Buried within the Tower District was the holy sanctum of the Hierarchs, the living quarters of the High Prophets. This chamber was decorated in the many shards of glass, taken from the world's purge during the War of Annihilation. Here they would receive senior military commanders and accept their shard tribute, for it would be a mighty sacrilege to do otherwise. Below it lay the fabled Mausoleum of the Arbiter, where the remains of the fallen arbiters of old were laid to rest for their service as the vanguard of the Great Journey. Connecting the numerous towers within this district was the famed Hanging Gardens and Valleys of Tears, where the races of the Covenant travel for thought and contemplation. Yet even the beauty of the Tower District paled in comparison to the shining jewel placed at the heart of the Golden City, the Dreadnought. With the signing of the Writ of Union, the vessel was not only decommissioned, but it became the primary source of power for the Sacred City. Much of the capital received the majority of its power from the Dreadnought, though it also possessed a set of backup auxiliary reactors that were capable of generating enough power for slipspace travel, known as the Founts. These massive network of clustered pinch fusion reactors were built to supplement the energy siphoned from the Forerunner ship, but these paled in comparison to the unlimited power from the Dreadnought's engines. For centuries of expansion and complacency left them wholly inadequate to keep the capital sufficiently powered. Throughout the centuries, High Charity became home to many species that joined our Holy Alliance, though this rapid growth would in time lead to violence. When thousands of Ungoi were brought to the city for labor and servitude, the rapid growth of their population demanded the Kig-Yar to relocate. This led to stress among their female population, and infant mortality rates rose and their birth rate declined. This led to the infusion crisis, where many jackal shipmasters poisoned Ungoi infusion supplies, and would be the spark of the dreaded Ungoi rebellion that broke out during the 39th Age of Conflict. The Ungoi lashed out at all within the Holy City, and was only pacified once their homeworld of Balaho was partially glassed, and order was once again restored to the capital. Decades later, when the War of Annihilation began at the beginning of the 9th Age of Reclamation, High Charity became a prize for the uncleaned human infidels, but its existence remained forever a secret to the unworthy. Later in the war, I had even heard an absurd story that the humans dared plan to sneak into the holy city and capture one of our hierarchs to force a truce. Pah! Ridiculous. Even if they managed to penetrate our defenses, they wouldn't make it into the Tower District, let alone the Blessed Sanctum, before being overwhelmed by thousands of devoted warriors. When the first sacred ring was discovered in the end year of the war, High Charity ventured forth to the ring, intent on fulfilling the ancient prophecies and begin the great journey. Instead, we found only desolation, ruin, and despair. The Holy Ring was defiled by the humans due to the incompetency of the Supreme Commander of the Covenant forces charged in its safety, Thel Vadami. Before the High Council, he was stripped of his station, and the entire city was made to watch as he was branded with the mark of shame, so all would know the price of failure. But sorrow soon gave way to jubilation. The gods had guided His High Holiness, the Prophet of Regret, to another of their great rings, Delta Halo. High Charity and its armada made great haste to this new ring, wherein Regret, under the charge of his elite honor guard, was assassinated by the demon, the very same who destroyed Alpha Halo. Yet again, elite failure amounted more failure, and finally, the hierarchy judged them unfit to protect their person. They were stripped of their station, and were replaced by the Jirlhane. In their arrogance, the Sanghili fought against this ruling, and the High Prophet of Truth decided to strike first. The elite High Counselors were summarily executed on the surface of the Sacred Ring, and all-out war broke out on High Charity, both within its orbit and within its streets. Comrades in arms now turned on one another. The Golden City was drenched in blood. The Great Schism had begun. I thought that was the most horrible thing that I should ever see, but I was quickly disabused of the notion, for a worse horror was awaiting us all. That came when a human vessel suddenly emerged from slipspace and collided with one of the great spires of the Tower District. Many of us feared what this might portend. Did the humans somehow discover a new path into High Charity? Was this the vanguard of an invasion? Or did the infidels intend on bringing one of their hell bombs to level our sacred city as they had done to Blessed Zoist many years before? No, and no, and no. This was far worse. Somehow, the parasite managed to capture the vessel, and from her ruinous remains, thousands upon thousands of flood spores poured forth into the city like a dark shroud, leaving naught but death. All those they corrupted turned into monstrous and unnatural creatures, mindless beasts with no other instinct but to destroy anything in its path. Those things, gods have mercy, I do not know how to speak of them. There were corpses with faces, hands torn within hands, twisting, slimy, unspeakable things that seemed to writhe and pulse and squirm as they came bursting from the flesh of their victims. Oh, Great Ones, protect me. The sounds they made. There was scarce an ounce of flesh upon their bones, so gaunt and starved did they appear. But they all had certain swellings once those monstrosities took hold of them, as they dug within flesh and bone. Then their skin bulged out, and then sunk down again. As if... No, not as if, for this was the truth of it. They were transforming into something new, something horrible. Living things moving and twisting, perhaps searching for a way out. And then their transformation is complete. They wrought devastation upon all. I escaped, though. I must remember that. Cling to that. Whatever they might have been, they were creatures of death and hunger. One after another, they lashed and consumed anything that laid before them. Gods preserve. I will not presume to give them names. They were horrors. But the ancients were not yet done in punishing us for our vanity and arrogance. As the flood swarmed throughout the city and as the great schism was raging in the streets, the immense Forerunner dreadnought at the center of High Charity, which had for so long served as a reminder of the writ of union between San Shayum and Sanghili, had suddenly rent free from its moorings and had begun to climb, a burning sun beaming from where its long-since decommissioned engines were. The noble and ancient vessel shook the entire city, concussively, reverberating through the air as it rose skyward to the upper parts of the dome. With its departure, so too was the last vestige of the homeworld of the San Shayum, the only world left to us. The dreadnought had abandoned us all, as did the Prophet of Truth. But the launch of the ancient vessel gave our flotilla time to escape the carnage of the schism, and allowed us to embark our exodus to Cloister, a shield world of the gods, so that when the great journey began, we can emerge and reshape the galaxy into something greater. But alas, nothing came of it, nor did any knowledge into what befell our city as we departed. What we do know was from intercepted transmissions between the Sanghili and their human allies. As we had feared, the flood had consumed High Charity, utterly transforming it into one of their wretched hives, a new lair for their ungodly collective intelligence, the Grave Mind. This abomination set its sights on the greatest stronghold of the Forerunners, the Ark. In the final battle of the war, High Charity emerged from slipspace and crash-landed on the surface of this masterwork of the Great Ones. Through the efforts of the Demon and the treacherous Arbiter, Thel Vadum, they had left High Charity to burn after destroying its last remaining founts, the auxiliary power supply of the city, while attempting to cleanse it from the flood infestation. No doubt the fools must have thought that alone would destroy the city, but High Charity is not some corvette that could be destroyed at a whim. It was the greatest creation of the Covenant, ordained by the gods themselves, the final home of their chosen speakers, the throne of a mighty empire that stood for over 3,000 years. It'll take more than that to destroy the fallen capital of the Covenant, Homogony, and the horrors that still lurk within.